Usually when you're trying to diagnose a problem, there's this expectation of precision.
Oh, totally. Like you want a clear answer.
Right. If you break your arm, you get an x-ray, and it shows this jagged white line. The doctor points to it, you look at it, and the diagnosis is just, it's binary.
Broken or not broken.
Exactly. It's clean, it's visible, and frankly, it's comforting because you know exactly what needs to be fixed. But diagnosing why you are stuck learning a foreign language.
Yeah, that is a completely different story.
We're pulling from a massive stack of linguistic research today because that diagnostic landscape is just murky. I mean, you move past the beginner phase, but you are miles away from fluent, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless.
It is the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters. I mean, educators and linguists refer to this space as the language learning plateau.
Or the intermediate plateau.
Right, exactly. And it is the exact point where the vast majority of adult language learners simply give up.
And that is the exact target for our deep dive today. If you're listening to this and you have been, pouring your energy into learning Spanish or Japanese or French, I am talking directly to you.
Because you know this feeling.
Deeply. It's a deeply frustrating feeling. You started out and progress was rapid. You can order food, you can navigate a train station, you can maybe even have a slightly clumsy chat about your weekend.
But now your progress feels like you're wading through thick mud.
Yes. You study, you review vocabulary, you try to practice, but you just do not feel like you're getting any better.
In the language community, we talk about the CEFR scale. The Common European Framework of Reference for Languages.
Right, which ranks you from A1 as a total beginner to C2 as native-like.
Exactly. And you were stuck at that A2 or B1 level. And honestly, it feels like a personal failure.
It really does, which I think is the first massive misconception we need to dismantle right now.
Absolutely, because we are going to look under the hood of your brain's language acquisition process today. We're drawing on research from linguists like Jack Richards, Paul Nation, and some really cool frameworks from platforms like TalkPal and MyLingual Cards.
And the consensus is pretty clear, right?
Oh, yeah. The overarching consensus in the scientific community is that the intermediate plateau is not a sign of failure. It has absolutely nothing to do with a lack of talent or some missing language gene.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's a highly predictable, biologically normal stage of second language acquisition.
I think we really need to linger on that because the psychological weight of feeling stuck is exactly what makes people quit. I mean, if I'm sitting for an hour a day and I still can't understand a simple news broadcast without pausing it 10 times, my immediate thought is, my brain is just not wired for this.
But your brain is actually doing exactly what it evolved to do. It's seeking homeostasis.
Homeostasis, like trying to save energy.
Exactly. The research by Jack Richards on moving from intermediate to advanced levels points out that at the A2 or B1 level, your brain is consolidating a functional but limited version of the new language.
So it's like you have enough vocabulary and basic grammar to survive a transactional interaction.
Right. If you need a coffee, you can get a coffee. If you need a bathroom, you can find it.
Which is great for survival.
It is. And your brain, which is fundamentally an energy conservation machine, realizes that you have enough language to survive. Therefore, it's quite happy to stay in that low-energy survival mode unless it is violently forced out of it.
So the plateau is essentially my brain saying, look, we didn't starve today. The waiter understood our terrible grammar. Let's just clock out and save some calories.
That is the literal biological reality of the intermediate plateau. Your brain is satisfied with good enough.
Wow.
To break out of it, we have to look at the anatomy of this stagnation. And a great place to start is what Paul Nation outlines in his landmark research on vocabulary acquisition.
Ah, yes. The vocabulary math problem.
Right, because the mathematics of learning literally change on you when you hit B1.
Let's look at those numbers, because I always felt like the effort-to-reward ratio completely collapsed after my first 6 months of studying.
It does. It really does. At the beginner stage, the A1 level, every single word you learn is high yield.
Like learning the word for water, or eat, or go.
Exactly. You use those words every single day. Nation's research demonstrates a linguistic phenomenon that aligns with Zipf's law. The first 2,000 most frequent words in a language cover about 80% of all everyday speech.
80% coverage with just 2,000 words. I mean, that is an absurdly high return on investment.
Right. You spend a few months learning those core words, and suddenly you go from zero comprehension to understanding the vast majority of a daily conversation.
The growth curve is almost vertical at that point. You just feel unstoppable.
But then you hit the B1 level, and you already know those core 2,000 words. The problem is, to reach true fluency at a B2 or C1 level, you need to learn the next 2,000 or 4,000 or 8,000 words.
And the marginal gain for each of those new words is vastly smaller, right? Because they appear far less frequently.
Exactly.
Right, so if I spend 20 minutes today memorizing the word for shoelace, and tomorrow I learn hesitant, and the next day I learn fluctuate, I might go 3 months before I ever actually need to use the word shoelace in a real conversation.
Yeah, you're putting in the exact same cognitive effort to memorize it as you did when you learned the word water, but the payoff is almost invisible.
You're working just as hard, perhaps harder, but your overall ability to communicate improves by, what, a fraction of a percent.
Exactly. The visible reward for your effort shrinks dramatically.
It reminds me of the mechanics behind leveling up in a role-playing video game.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, you start a new game, and getting your character from level 1 to level 10 takes maybe an hour. Every basic monster you defeat gives you a massive experience boost.
You're constantly unlocking new skills, new powers.
Exactly, you feel like you are rushing forward. But then you hit level 50, and getting from level 50 to level 51 requires weeks of grinding.
Just endless grinding.
Right, you're doing the exact same repetitive tasks, fighting harder monsters, just to see the progress bar move a single millimeter. The effort required goes through the roof, but the dopamine hit of leveling up is delayed for weeks.
A very apt visualization.
Yeah.
And compounding this vocabulary math problem is a deeply ingrained cognitive hurdle called fossilization.
Fossilization.
Yeah, Larry Selinker introduced this concept back in 1972 when studying what he called interlanguage.
Which is what exactly?
It's the unique transitional linguistic system a learner builds in their own mind as they learn.
So fossilization. It implies something hardening, becoming rigid and unchangeable.
Yeah.
How does this actually play out in a real conversation?
Okay, let's visualize this. You walk into a cafe in Madrid or Paris or Tokyo. You are at an intermediate level, so you possess a good enough grasp of the grammar. You successfully order a complex meal. You ask the waiter a question about the ingredients, and they bring you exactly what you wanted.
Success.
The communication was a total success. However, during that interaction, you might have made 3 or 4 fundamental grammatical errors.
Oh, sure. Like, I used the wrong verb tense, I completely ignored gender agreement, and my word order was just a direct translation from my native language.
Exactly. But the waiter still brought the food.
I got my point across, so why does it matter?
Which triggers the fossilization trap. Because the communication was successful, your brain's reward center fires, you got the food, your brain registers this as a win, and simultaneously loses any evolutionary motivation to correct the grammatical mistakes you made.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Over time, because you keep successfully getting what you want using broken grammar, the error becomes a permanent automatic habit. It fossilizes.
So your brain essentially asks, why should I spend immense cognitive energy calculating complex subjunctive grammar rules when I already get the coffee without them?
Exactly. But I find myself, wait, I want to anticipate a challenge here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because a lot of people say, well, the ultimate goal of learning a language is human connection and communication, and the locals understand me perfectly fine despite my messy verb tenses. Why does good enough grammar actually matter?
Right, if my goal isn't to write a PhD thesis in Italian, why should I care if my grammar is permanently stuck at B1?
It's a fair challenge, and it cuts to the core of what fluency actually means. Good enough is perfectly fine for transactional interactions, ordering coffee, buying a train ticket, asking for directions.
Right.
But relying on fossilized, good enough grammar keeps you permanently locked out of deep, meaningful fluency. It acts as a glass ceiling.
Meaning I can't express anything beyond the immediate present.
Precisely. You cannot engage with abstract ideas. You cannot follow complex, nuanced arguments. You struggle to express subtle emotional states. You certainly cannot participate in a professional or academic environment.
Right.
Jack Richards points out that to reach a B2 level, learners must be able to use complex sentences. They need subordination, which means linking independent and dependent clauses to show cause and effect.
And modal constructions, right, to talk about hypotheticals, obligations, or probabilities.
Exactly.
So if my friend is telling me a story about a moral dilemma they faced at work, and I want to say, well, if you had known about the policy beforehand, you might have been able to change the outcome.
That's a very complex thought.
Right. I can't just mash together present tense vocabulary words to convey that level of hypothetical regret. I need precision.
You need structural precision to convey complex thought. Fossilization is the anchor keeping you in the shallow end of the language.
Okay, so how do we break those fossilized habits?
We have to look at skill acquisition theory. Specifically, the framework developed by Robert de Keyser. He argues that acquiring a language is not a unique magical process. It follows the exact same neurological pattern as learning any other complex high-friction skill.
Like learning to play the piano or learning to drive a car.
Exactly. De Keyser breaks this down into 3 distinct cognitive stages.
Okay, what's stage 1?
Stage 1 is the declarative stage.
Hmm.
This is explicit knowledge. You sit in a classroom or you read a textbook and you memorize a rule. For instance, you learn the rule that in English, to make a regular verb past tense, you add the suffix ed. You possess the fact.
Right, but having the fact filed away in my hippocampus doesn't mean I can actually retrieve it and use it when a native speaker is talking to me at full speed.
No, it does not. To do that, you have to transition to stage 2, the procedural stage.
Which is the painful part.
Very painful. This is where you attempt to apply the declarative rule in real time, but it requires massive, conscious, deliberate effort. You are in the middle of a sentence, you realize you need to speak about something that happened yesterday, your brain physically pauses the speech motor functions.
It searches your memory for the past tense rule.
Right. It retrieves the ed suffix, attaches it to the verb, and then sends the signal to your vocal cords to speak. It is incredibly clunky. It creates a massive cognitive load.
That is the exact feeling of learning to drive a manual transmission car.
Oh, that's perfect.
When you first start, you have to consciously talk yourself through every micro movement. Okay, left foot, press the clutch. Right hand, move the stick into second gear. Slowly release the clutch while gently pressing the gas.
You can execute the maneuver, but you are sweating.
And you absolutely cannot have a conversation with the passenger next to you while you do it. Your brain is maxed out.
The cognitive bandwidth is completely consumed by the procedure. Now, stage 3 is the automatic stage.
Ah, the holy grail.
Yes. Through repeated practice, the skill becomes fully automatic, driven by procedural memory in the basal ganglia. You use the past tense perfectly without any conscious awareness of the rule.
You just shift gears in the car while drinking a coffee and listening to the radio. You don't even feel your feet moving.
Exactly. So the intermediate plateau, this massive source of frustration, is essentially just the waiting room between stage 2 and stage 3.
It's the grueling, friction-filled transition from procedural to automatic.
Yes. You know the rules. You have the declarative knowledge. You can even apply them with intense effort. But making them fully automatic requires extensive, deliberate practice. The plateau is the gap between knowing how to do something and doing it effortlessly.
If that is the case, then passive learning, just like listening to podcasts in the background or casually reviewing flashcards that might have gotten us from 0 to B1, but it's mathematically impossible for passive absorption to push us into the automatic state.
Completely impossible. Comprehension is a completely different neurological pathway than production. You must force output to build automaticity.
We cannot coast our way to B2. We have to talk about deliberate practice and specifically what I would call hardcore output.
Hardcore is a good word for it.
I was reading through the source material regarding Robert Kocher's writing method, and I have to admit my very first thought was, this is archaic, and frankly, it sounds like a massive waste of time in the modern era.
It sounds totally brutal at first.
Right. But Kocher argues that the reason most learners never escape the lower intermediate level is that they refuse to do the hardest, most uncomfortable thing, highly focused, concerted effort on writing without safety nets.
It's a remarkably rigorous approach, and it directly targets the procedural friction we just discussed.
Okay, lay it out for us.
Kocher challenges learners to evaluate themselves objectively. If you think you are intermediate, but you freeze up in conversation, look at how you write an email in your target language. Do you use a dictionary? Do you use a spell checker? Do you quickly Google a conjugation?
I mean, absolutely. Every time I type a message in another language, I get that little red squiggly line telling me I messed up a vowel or a double consonant. I just right-click, select the correct spelling, and move on without a second thought.
And Kocher argues that those digital tools are crutches that completely short-circuit the learning process. They prevent your brain from experiencing the necessary struggle of cognitive retrieval. To truly integrate grammar and vocabulary into your productive repertoire, you have to eliminate the crutches. If you rely on a spell checker, you are engaging in passive recognition. You are just confirming the correct form when the computer offers it to you. You are not producing it.
So his solution is the pen and paper writing challenge, and the parameters are strict.
Very strict.
He suggests taking a familiar B1 level topic. Maybe you're describing your family, a recent travel experience, your job, or a hobby. You sit down at a desk, you have a pen and a blank piece of paper, no phone, no laptop, no dictionary,
No escape.
none. And you must produce a text of 100 to 120 words.
The physical constraint of the pen and paper is vital here. Forcing your brain to dig deep and retrieve the vocabulary and syntax entirely from your own memory is the exact mechanism that turns procedural knowledge into automatic knowledge. The struggle is the point.
But just writing the 100 words is only step one. The actual process he outlines is borderline punishing.
It is an endurance test.
Because writing without a dictionary is initially terrifying, he suggests a ramp-up phase. Spend 2 weeks just studying native-produced examples of short texts. Type out your own versions, send them to a tutor or a language exchange forum for correction.
Right. That's the scaffolding.
Then, and this is the part that made me wince, you have to handwrite the corrected text into a notebook, meticulously comparing it to your original unedited text.
Yes. And he places massive emphasis on paying close attention to repeated fossilized errors. If you misspell a fundamental word, you don't just highlight it. He suggests writing that specific word 50 or 100 times by hand.
50 to 100 times.
You must overwrite the fossilized error quickly and brutally, because those foundational mistakes are structurally holding back your progress.
So after 2 weeks of this guided training wheels phase, you take the training wheels off, you pick a topic, you spend a minute thinking about the vocabulary you will need, and you give yourself 20 minutes to write your 100-word text by hand.
Double space so you leave room for corrections.
Good point. You walk away, come back an hour later, and proofread yourself with fresh eyes. Then you write out a clean final draft by hand.
And the loop continues.
Yes. You take that clean handwritten draft, you finally type it into your computer, and you send it to your tutor. When the tutor sends back the redlined corrections, you write your text out by hand a third time, physically integrating the corrections into the flow of the sentences to ensure your brain actually processes the mechanics of what you did wrong.
It's all about forced integration.
But wait, handwriting 100-word essays and copying them 3 times. In the era of AI and predictive text, does the neuroscience actually support doing this manually? It feels like we're just punishing ourselves.
It feels like punishment because it demands maximum cognitive load, but the neuroscience absolutely supports it.
Really?
Yes, writing by hand engages the brain's motor pathways in a way that typing on a keyboard simply does not. When you form the letters of a difficult word, you are creating a stronger, more complex memory trace. You are forcing your brain to dwell on the structure of the language.
Which builds that myelin sheath we talked about.
Exactly. Coucher is transparent about the intensity, though. He warns that this is a serious commitment, adding perhaps 6 to 8 hours of study per week.
That's practically a part-time job.
It is. He states you must commit to this for 2 to 4 months just to break into a high B2 level. If you want C1, you double it to 4 months.
It sounds utterly exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
But if we map this back to the Kaiser's skill acquisition, it makes perfect sense.
It connects perfectly.
Doing this kind of deliberate, agonizing retrieval on a piece of paper is exactly what prepares you for the chaos of a live conversation. In a cafe, you don't have 20 minutes to think about the subjunctive tense.
Right.
But because you have sweat blood producing those exact sentence structures on the page, the neural pathways are already heavily myelinated.
The signals travel faster.
Right. You can recall the structures instantly when speaking. It seems like the ultimate cure for fossilization.
It is the embodiment of deliberate practice. You are isolating your weaknesses, forcing yourself to use unfamiliar structures in conjunction with known structures to produce new ideas. As Kosher notes, there is simply no language plateau that can withstand that level of targeted, high-friction training.
Okay, but reaching B2 isn't just about perfectly executing grammar rules like a robot, right? There's a massive element of sounding natural, of having a rhythm to your speech.
And that brings us to the concept of chunks and collocations.
This is a critical pivot in how intermediate learners need to view vocabulary.
Yeah.
When we are at the A2 or low B1 level, we tend to construct sentences as if we were assembling Lego blocks.
We work word by word.
Right. We find a noun, We search our memory for an adjective, we find a verb to connect them, and we stick them together.
But the seminal research by Polly and Sider on native-like fluency reveals that advanced speakers do not build sentences word by word.
If they aren't building them word by word, what is the mechanism?
They rely on prefabricated chunks or formulaic sequences. Specifically, they use collocations. A collocation is a specific combination of words that native speakers naturally and frequently use together, even if other combinations are entirely grammatically possible and make logical sense.
Give us a concrete example of this Lego block building versus native chunking.
Okay, consider the English word heavy. At a beginner level, you learn heavy translates to something that weighs a significant amount, like a heavy suitcase.
Right.
But as you attempt to reach B2, you realize native speakers use heavy in highly specific, illogical chunks. We say heavy rain or heavy traffic, or we say someone has a heavy accent. You would never look out the window and say, wow, it is strong rain today.
Strong rain makes perfect grammatical sense, though. Strong is an adjective describing the intensity of the noun rain. A computer would say strong rain is correct, but to a native speaker, it sounds immediately foreign.
Exactly. Or consider automotive vocabulary. We say a sports car has a powerful engine. We do not say it has a strong engine.
Even though a powerful engine and a strong engine logically mean the same thing.
Right. There is no underlying grammatical rule dictating this. You cannot deduce it through logic. It is pure linguistic convention. Polly and Sider argue that true native-like fluency depends on possessing a mental library of tens of thousands of these prefabricated sequences.
This completely reframes the plateau. If you are stuck, part of the immense exhaustion you feel during a conversation is because you are still trying to invent every single sentence from scratch, translating word by word instead of just dropping in pre-built chunks.
The cognitive load of word-by-word assembly is staggering, which is exactly why intermediate speakers sound slow, hesitant, and robotic.
So when you shift your focus to mastering collocations, learning make a decision as a single, unbreakable unit rather than translating the verb make and the noun decision separately, you bypass the assembly process.
You dramatically increase your processing speed. You sound infinitely more natural, and most importantly, you free up vital brain power to actually focus on the complex ideas you were trying to communicate.
Okay, so we have a hardcore pen and paper output method to fix our grammar. And we are pivoting our vocabulary strategy to focus on collocations rather than isolated words. But one of the most surprising insights from the sources is how this grueling output practice directly impacts our listening comprehension.
It seems counterintuitive that writing by hand would improve your ability to hear, doesn't it?
Completely. But the neurological logic holds up.
Sure.
By forcing your brain through the deep cognitive retrieval required to write complex structures, you are essentially preloading those patterns into your auditory processing centers.
Exactly. When you finally hear a native speaker use that complex structure, your brain recognizes it instantly because it has already built the pathway. It doesn't have to pause and decode it.
And we need every advantage we can get because listening at the A2 and B1 levels is arguably the most brutal hurdle. I mean, we really need to focus on these daily activities for improving listening.
The data from language educators consistently cites listening comprehension as the primary cause of learner despair.
I believe it.
And the insights provided by the TalkPaul AI language platform break down the specific acoustic and cognitive reasons why listening is so devastatingly difficult at this stage. First and foremost, there is the sheer, unyielding speed of native speech.
Native speakers do not speak in the clear, separated words you see printed on a textbook page.
No, they engage in connected speech. They blur words together, they drop consonants, they reduce vowels. It is a phenomenon called acoustic masking and elision. What looks like distinct words on paper becomes a continuous acoustic blur in the air.
A classic English example, you read this sentence,
Yeah.
what are you going to do? But what actually hits your eardrum in a real conversation is, what you gonna do?
What you gonna do? Exactly.
If your brain is desperately searching its database for the distinct word going, it completely misses the compressed sound nagata, and the entire sentence collapses.
Add to that the unpredictability of accents. You may have spent 2 years listening to a teacher or an app with a perfectly clear, standardized accent. The moment you step off a train and ask a local for directions, their regional accent alters the vowel sound so drastically it sounds like an entirely different language.
And we can't ignore the vocabulary gaps. In reading, if you don't know a word, you use context clues from the rest of the paragraph to guess the meaning. In listening, the speech just keeps moving.
It's relentless.
Right. If you miss one crucial verb, you start panicking, your cognitive load spikes, and you completely tune out the next 3 sentences. Plus, real-world listening involves background noise.
Oh, that's a huge factor.
The perfectly silent studio recordings from our beginner apps don't prepare us for trying to hear a barista over the sound of an espresso machine in traffic.
Therefore, passive listening, the common advice to just immerse yourself by having a foreign language podcast playing in the background while you fold laundry, is entirely insufficient for breaking the plateau.
Your brain will simply tune it out as ambient noise.
You must engage in active, targeted listening.
So how do we structure that on a daily basis? TalkPal suggests a specific routine.
The first technique requires shifting your mindset before the audio even begins. You must listen with a purpose through prediction.
Prediction. Like guessing what they're going to say.
Sort of. If you are about to listen to a short podcast episode titled How to Bake Sourdough Bread, you do not just hit play. You pause and force your brain to predict the vocabulary you are about to encounter. You prime your neural networks for words like flour, oven, knead, temperature, yeast.
You are essentially warming up the specific linguistic sector of your brain so it isn't caught off guard.
Precisely. Then, during the listening phase, you must externalize your focus. You take physical notes, you jot down key phrases, or phonetically spell out words you don't recognize so you can look them up later. This prevents your attention from drifting.
And crucially, you don't just listen once and move on. The sources outline a repeat and reflect cycle.
Repetition is where the actual decoding happens. Your first pass through a 3-minute audio clip should be purely for general meaning. You do not pause it. You do not panic if you miss a sentence. You train your brain to tolerate ambiguity and grasp the main idea.
And the second pass.
Then you listen a second time, but this time your filter is tight. You are hunting for specific details, trying to parse that acoustic blur, filling in the gaps in your notes.
But there is another, much more aggressive listening technique mentioned in the research, specifically studied by Yo Hamada in 2016, that targets the physical mechanics of speaking. It is called the shadowing technique.
Shadowing is a powerhouse exercise for intermediate learners. The methodology is straightforward but intense. You listen to an audio recording of a native speaker, and you attempt to repeat exactly what they are saying aloud, simultaneously, trailing just a split second behind them. You are acting as their vocal shadow.
I'm going to push back on this because I have tried shadowing, and it feels ridiculous. Am I not just mindlessly parroting sounds without actually comprehending the meaning of the words?
It does feel like that at first.
Right. If I'm putting all my energy into just matching the syllables at a breakneck speed, I'm not internalizing the grammar.
That is the most common critique of shadowing, but it fundamentally misunderstands the neurological goal of the exercise. Hamada's research demonstrates that shadowing is not primarily an exercise in deep reading comprehension. It is a targeted exercise in automaticity, prosody, and articulatory processing speed.
Let's define prosody for the listener because that is a crucial piece of the fluency puzzle.
Prosody refers to the music of the language. It is the rhythm, the stress patterns, the intonation, the way pitch rises at the end of a question or falls at the end of a statement.
Like the melody.
Exactly. Every language has a unique prosodic blueprint. When you are stuck in the procedural stage thinking about grammar rules, your speech is choppy. You sound like a metronome. Shadowing bypasses the slow, conscious, analytical part of your brain. By forcing you to instantly mimic the native speaker's speed and rhythm, you are creating a high-speed feedback loop between your auditory cortex and your motor cortex.
You are physically training the muscles in your mouth, tongue, and vocal cords to move at the speed of the target language without waiting for the conscious brain to give the green light.
Yes. You are training the motor pathways to produce natural-sounding language sequences without overthinking them. It is a physiological workout for your vocal tract that builds the physical infrastructure for fluency.
So, if we combine active listening with prediction and note-taking, and then run a few minutes of high-speed shadowing, we have a potent daily routine. But to execute this, we need the right fuel. What exactly should an A2 or B1 learner be listening to or reading?
This is huge because the material itself can either help you break the plateau or keep you trapped there.
Right, which leads us directly into one of the most fiercely debated topics in language pedagogy, the reliance on graded readers versus the leap to authentic materials. And we really need to include these suggestions for authentic materials.
Absolutely. So graded readers are those books specifically engineered for language learners.
They take a classic story, like Treasure Island or Dracula, and completely rewrite it using a restricted vocabulary list. So an A2 graded reader might only use the 500 most common words in the language.
Correct. They are rigorously tailored to specific CEFR levels. And the foundational theory here comes from linguist Stephen Krashen, the pioneer of the comprehensible input hypothesis.
Comprehensible input meaning you need to understand most of what you're consuming to learn from it.
Exactly. Krashen argues that we acquire language most effectively through extensive reading, consuming large volumes of text that are slightly above our current level, allowing us to absorb vocabulary naturally through context without constantly consulting a dictionary. Graded readers are explicitly designed to provide this friction-free experience.
It sounds like the perfect tool. Why is there a debate?
Because while graded readers are an incredible confidence builder for beginners, researchers like Hafiz and Tudor argue they become a trap for intermediate learners. They can actively contribute to the plateau.
Because the vocabulary is too limited.
It is deeper than the vocabulary, it is a structural issue. To simplify a complex narrative for a B1 reader, publishers don't just swap out a difficult verb for an easy one, they systematically dismantle the natural syntax of the language.
Oh, interesting.
They eradicate complex subordinate clauses. They remove natural, messy idioms. They flatten the sentence structure into a repetitive subject-verb-object rhythm. You are not reading the target language. You are reading a sterilized, artificial simulation of it.
So I might read 10 graded readers and feel incredibly fluent, but the moment I pick up a real newspaper or try to read a novel, I hit a brick wall because my brain has never been exposed to the chaotic, layered architecture of how native speakers actually write.
Exactly. Hafiz and Tudor suggest that prolonged exposure to simplified syntax stunts your linguistic growth. And we have compelling real-world evidence for the power of transitioning to authentic materials.
Nishino study.
Yes, there was a fascinating longitudinal study conducted by Nishino focusing on Japanese middle school students learning English.
I was looking at the Nishino study in our research stack, and I was completely surprised by the methodology. Giving middle schoolers dense, unsimplified fantasy novels seems like a recipe for total frustration.
It seems counterintuitive, but Nishino tracked these students over 2.5 years. Initially, at lower proficiencies, the students thrived on graded readers, but as they approached the intermediate stage, a distinct behavioral shift occurred.
They started getting bored.
They began to lose motivation completely. The sanitized language of the graded readers felt sterile, repetitive, and frankly, childish.
So the researchers removed the safety net.
They pivoted entirely to authentic materials. Specifically, they handed these intermediate students the original, unabridged English versions of Harry Potter books 4 and 5,
Which are massive, complex texts.
along with another fantasy novel called Stravaganza.
Going from a 50-page simplified booklet to a 700-page J.K. Rowling novel with made-up magical vocabulary and complex British slang, did they not just shut down from cognitive overload?
They absolutely faced a vertical learning curve, but the results overturned conventional wisdom. The introduction of authentic materials triggered a massive spike in intrinsic motivation.
Because they actually cared about the story.
Exactly. The students stopped reading to learn English. They were reading because they were deeply emotionally invested in the narrative. They desperately needed to know what happened to Harry or Hermione. That burning curiosity acted as an engine, propelling them through the intense linguistic friction.
Because they were finally engaging with the language in its natural, untamed state, their reading comprehension and vocabulary acquisition accelerated far beyond what the graded readers could have achieved.
The takeaway here is profound. If you are stuck at B1, your lack of progress might actually be a lack of authentic friction. It is time to burn the textbook dialogues and ditch the graded readers. We need authentic materials that we actually care about.
Our sources provided a curated list of recommendations for daily listening and reading at this level.
The key is finding authentic material that provides natural complexity without being utterly impenetrable. You want a challenge, not a brick wall.
For daily listening, the sources highly recommend stepping stone podcasts. Things like the BBC's The English We Speak, or DSL Pod. These are hosted by native speakers, using natural idioms and collocations, but they speak with slightly more clarity and intentionally explain the cultural context of the phrases.
Video content is also crucial because it provides visual context. TED Talks are phenomenal for B1 learners.
Because they usually have a very clear structure.
Right. The speakers generally use clear, structured arguments, they articulate well, and the visual aids help bridge the comprehension gaps when the vocabulary gets dense. Late-night talk shows, while harder due to cultural jokes and rapid banter, provide exposure to authentic conversational pacing.
One of my favorite recommendations from the sources is utilizing music, but not just having it on in the background. Actively listening to a song while following the lyrics line by line online. Music forces you to hear how words are contracted and reduced to fit a rhythm, which perfectly trains your ear for that acoustic blur we talked about earlier.
It's a great tool.
But out of all the examples of authentic material in the research, there was one that absolutely stood out because it wasn't a piece of media at all. It was a sociocultural event.
You are referring to the qualitative study by Utugulova, Mirzai, and their colleagues, which examined EFL teachers' perceptions of the language plateau in Kazakhstan.
Yes. The researchers interviewed teachers about what actually breaks students out of a rut. And one teacher described an initiative at the American Corners, which are these U.S.-sponsored cultural centers during the 2008 presidential election between Barack Obama and John McCain.
Yeah.
And just to be clear for our listeners, since the source touches on a historical political campaign, we are strictly looking at this through an educational methodology lens. We are not endorsing any political viewpoints, candidates, or parties. We are simply examining how educators used a massive real-world event as a pedagogical tool.
It is a brilliant case study in experiential learning. The educators did not just print out a news article about the U.S. election and have the students highlight the verbs. They organized a fully immersive mock election within the cultural center.
The intermediate students had to research the candidates' platforms, debate the policies, attempt to persuade their peers, and actually cast ballots.
Think about the linguistic demands of that scenario. You aren't just filling in a worksheet. You are trying to win an argument. You are forced to use complex future conditionals. If this candidate implements this policy, the economy will react this way.
You are using the language of persuasion, of disagreement. It completely obliterates the sterile academic feel of language learning. You are wielding the language as a tool to achieve a real-world goal.
That emotional and social engagement creates a stickiness in the brain that rote memorization can never replicate.
It shifts the learner's identity. They stop viewing the language as an object of study and begin viewing it as a medium of participation. That identity shift is often the catalyst that shatters the plateau.
It's powerful stuff.
Okay, so we have built an incredible arsenal so far. We are doing Culture's agonizing handwritten essays to forge grammar pathways. We are actively predicting podcast vocabulary and shadowing native speakers. We are reading unsimplified Harry Potter and debating mock elections. That is all highly engaging, high-friction work. But realistically, we are adults with jobs, families, and limited energy. We encounter hundreds of new words in these authentic materials. How do we ensure those words actually make it into our long-term memory? Reading a word in a novel does not guarantee you will remember it a week later.
No, it doesn't.
We need a structured daily system to lock in vocabulary without spending 3 hours a day studying. We need to propose a weekly or really daily 15-minute focused practice schedule.
This requires us to look at the neuroscience of memory retention. We need to implement a 15-minute focused practice schedule utilizing a spaced repetition system, commonly known as SRS.
SRS, right.
The platform MyLingua Cards provides an excellent breakdown of why SRS is the gold standard, particularly when we contrast it with the incredibly flawed study habits most of us naturally fall back on.
I think we need to expose those bad habits because I guarantee I am guilty of all of them. Let's start with the most common one, cramming. Just opening a notebook and staring at a list of 50 new words for an hour straight.
Cramming, which cognitive psychologists call massed practice, is a trap because it feels incredibly productive in the moment. When you stare at a list of words for an hour, your brain gets warm, the neural pathways fire rapidly, and you achieve a temporary sense of fluency.
You look at the word, and your brain says, yes, I know this perfectly.
But it is an illusion. Massed practice only loads the information into short-term working memory. It creates temporary familiarity, not structural long-term retention. Within 48 hours, the vast majority of that knowledge simply evaporates.
Okay, what about the classic old-school method, the two-column vocabulary list? The foreign word on the left, the native translation on the right. You cover the right side, read the word, and test yourself.
The fatal flaw of the two-column list is that it almost entirely trains passive recognition. You become very efficient at recognizing the target word when it is presented to you visually.
But as we established, speaking is an active production skill.
Right. During a conversation, the native speaker does not hold up a flashcard with the target word on it. You have to pull the word out of thin air. Rereading lists rarely transfers to the real-time demands of speech.
What about memory hacks? Mnemonics, I used to rely heavily on these. If I wanted to remember that the Spanish word for shoe is zapato, I would picture a giant shoe with a zipper on the toe. Zipato. It's weird, so I remember it.
Mnemonics are brilliant cognitive hooks for the initial encoding phase, especially for abstract or stubborn words. They provide an artificial stickiness. However, they present a massive hurdle for advanced fluency. If your mnemonic association is too complex, it slows down your processing speed. When you want to say shoe in a fluid conversation, your brain has to consciously route the signal through the bizarre image of the zipper before it can retrieve the word zapato. It adds latency.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Furthermore, learners often experience the frustrating phenomenon of perfectly remembering their funny story, but completely forgetting the target word attached to it.
So cramming, lists, and memory tricks all have severe limitations for reaching B2. Why does a spaced repetition system in SRS solve this?
SRS is essentially an algorithm that automates the two most robust, scientifically proven mechanisms for building long-term memory: the spacing effect and the testing effect.
We need to unpack the neurology behind those, starting with the spacing effect. Why does time matter?
The spacing effect is based on Hermann Ebbinghaus's research on the forgetting curve. It dictates that spreading your study sessions out over time creates exponentially stronger memory retention than cramming.
Because your brain is forgetting it in the meantime.
Exactly. When you learn a word, the neural pathway immediately begins to decay. Your brain assumes the information is not vital for survival. The key is to wait until you are just about to forget the word and then force your brain to recall it.
That friction again.
Yes. That specific struggle of recalling a fading memory sends a powerful signal to the brain that this information is important, causing the brain to thicken the myelin sheath around that neural pathway, making the memory stronger and faster to access. An SRS algorithm tracks the decay curve of every single word and schedules your review at the exact optimal moment of friction.
And the testing effect.
The testing effect proves that the sheer act of struggling to retrieve an answer from your memory modifies the brain and improves long-term retention far more effectively than passively rereading the correct answer. SRS utilizes flashcards where you must exert effort to recall the answer before revealing the back of the card.
Okay, so the science is solid. SRS is the engine. But how do we actually drive it? Because I've downloaded SRS apps before, found a massive deck titled The 5,000 Most Common Words, and within 4 days, the algorithm dumped 300 reviews on me. I spent an hour clicking buttons, got completely overwhelmed, and deleted the app.
That is the most common point of failure. SRS becomes a nightmare when learners treat it like a digital dumping ground for every word they encounter. My Lingua Cards outlines a very strict 15-minute daily blueprint to prevent algorithmic burnout.
Step 1 of the blueprint, the 10-word limit.
This is a mandate for quality over quantity. Do not attempt to input 30 or 50 words a day. You will drown in reviews. Select a maximum of 10 high-value words daily. These should be words you encountered in your authentic materials that you actually want to use. Words highly relevant to your specific job, your hobbies, or your daily life.
Step 2, contextual flashcards. I think this is where the vast majority of learners break their own systems.
Absolutely. The fatal error is creating a flashcard with a single target word on the front and 5 different nuanced dictionary translations on the back. A highly functional flashcard must answer one clear question. You should never learn a word in isolation.
Right.
The blueprint dictates writing one short, natural example phrase that provides the context. You are not just memorizing the word, you are memorizing its collocations and its grammatical environment.
I use an analogy for this. I compare bad flashcards to a messy closet. If you create a flashcard and the example sentence is some archaic, convoluted paragraph you copied from a dictionary, or it lists 3 entirely different abstract meanings, and you fail the card, you aren't failing because you lack willpower or possess a bad memory.
You're failing because your closet is disorganized.
Exactly. You are failing because your mental closet is a mess. You can't find the specific shirt you need because it is buried under a pile of useless junk. A perfectly designed flashcard is a single clean shirt on a single hanger. The cue is clear, the context is visible, and the answer is accessible.
That is a phenomenal visualization. Keep the contextual sentence simple enough that you can actually recall the entire structure, not just the isolated word.
Which brings us to step 3, the most critical step for transforming passive reading knowledge into active speaking fluency two-way testing.
During your 15-minute focused block, you must configure your SRS to test you in both directions. Phase 1, target language to native language. You see the foreign word, and you attempt to recall its meaning. This builds your passive recognition, which is essential for reading Harry Potter and listening to podcasts.
But if you stop there, you stay on the plateau.
Correct. Phase 2 is mandatory native language to target language. You see the prompt in your native tongue, and you must actively retrieve and produce the foreign word or phrase. This is the heavy neurological lift.
Is the active production part.
Yes. This is the specific training that ensures when you're standing in a cafe searching for a word, your brain knows how to fire the retrieval pathway. If you exclusively train recognition, your vocabulary will remain forever trapped in your passive understanding.
So to summarize the daily system, 15 minutes a day, just 10 highly relevant words, short contextual sentences built around collocations, and brutally testing yourself in both directions. It is entirely manageable, it prevents algorithmic overload, and it structurally alters how your brain accesses vocabulary.
It is a sustainable engine for continuous, measurable growth.
We have laid out a massive, comprehensive toolkit here. The hardcore handwriting, the active shadowing, the authentic materials, the SRS schedule. But we have to address the elephant in the room. The intermediate plateau is not just a mechanical problem of bad flashcards or poor syntax. It is deeply, profoundly psychological.
It really is.
How on earth do you maintain the motivation to do 15 minutes of flashcards and gruelingly handwrite essays when your official CEFR level hasn't moved from B1 in 8 months? The lack of visible progress is soul-crushing.
The psychology of the plateau is perhaps the most critical barrier, and it is heavily featured in the research by Utogalova and Mirzai. In their analysis of teacher perceptions, they identified that a primary cause of prolonged stagnation is not a lack of effort, but a psychological phenomenon linguists call the affective filter.
The affective filter. It sounds like a piece of equipment for a fish tank, but it's actually an invisible wall in the mind.
It is a neurological blockade. The affective filter is comprised of learner anxiety, low self-esteem, fear of judgment, and peer pressure. When a learner is stressed or self-conscious when this filter is high, it literally inhibits the brain's language acquisition device. The amygdala registers a threat, and the brain physically blocks the processing and integration of new linguistic input.
So I could be executing Kotcher's writing method perfectly. I could be staring at the most beautifully constructed contextual flashcard. But if I am carrying massive anxiety about my lack of progress, the information simply bounces off my brain.
Precisely. Utogulova's qualitative study found that intermediate students suffer from intense, paralyzing anxiety. They feel they have exhausted their potential. They constantly compare their clumsy speech to the fluid speech of advanced learners.
Oh, the comparison trap.
It's huge. One teacher in the study explicitly noted a scenario where a student completely stopped progressing, specifically because she felt intimidated by the A students in her classroom. She was so terrified of making a grammatical mistake in front of them that her affective filter shot up and her learning completely shut down.
That is so incredibly relatable. The fear of sounding stupid, of losing your adult competence when you speak a foreign language, is the ultimate progress killer. We would rather stay silent than risk the embarrassment of a fossilized error.
Conversely, the teachers observed that highly extroverted students, or students who simply cared less about social judgment, pushed through the B1 plateau significantly faster. It is not that they possess superior memory or better study habits. It is that their affective filter was persistently low.
They were just willing to look foolish.
Exactly. They were willing to speak, willing to make 100 messy mistakes, and therefore they engaged in more production and received more corrective feedback.
Lowering that anxiety is absolutely paramount. It feels like the prerequisite for all the mechanical techniques we discussed. If a traditional, competitive classroom environment spikes your anxiety, you have to engineer an alternative.
The teachers in the study highly recommended utilizing low-stakes environments like speaking clubs, similar to the American Corner's mock election, where the sole objective is human connection and communication, not receiving a grade on your grammar.
This is also where modern technology offers a profound advantage. AI conversational platforms, such as TalkPal, provide an entirely novel environment for lowering the affective filter. You can engage in open-ended vocal conversations, you can stumble, you can use the wrong verb tense 50 times, and the AI will never judge you, sigh in frustration, or roll its eyes.
It provides a psychologically safe space to practice the grueling transition from procedural to automatic speech without the social risk.
A completely judgment-free zone to build automaticity. I love that. But even if we manage our anxiety and lower the filter, the human brain still craves a sense of forward momentum. If we cannot look at a standardized test score that says, congratulations, you have officially leveled up to B2, how do we measure our progress during the long, invisible months of the plateau?
If you are at a plateau, you must fundamentally change your metrics for success. If you measure your daily progress by asking, how many entirely new words did I learn today? You will inevitably feel like you are failing because of the vocabulary math problem we discussed at the beginning.
So what should we measure instead?
The platform Tortalingua provides a fantastic alternative framework. They outline 4 specific new metrics you should adopt to track your intermediate growth.
Walk us through these new metrics. What should I be looking for to prove to myself that I am actually getting better?
Metric number 1, comprehension speed. Consider a B1 level podcast you listened to a month ago. You understood the general gist of it. If you listen to that exact same podcast today, the metric is not whether you learned new words from it. The metric is, can you now process the audio without pausing?
Oh, that's a great test.
Can you follow the native speaker's natural cadence in real time without needing to rewind every 30 seconds to decode a sentence? If your processing speed is increased, your brain is moving from procedural to automatic. That is massive, undeniable progress.
That makes perfect sense. It's not about new information. It's about the efficiency of processing existing information. Metric number 2.
Metric number 2, error reduction. This requires creating an objective baseline. Record a 3-minute audio clip of yourself speaking spontaneously about a familiar topic. Do this once a month.
And then compare them.
Yes. When you compare the recordings over time, you are not expecting sudden, flawless fluency. You are specifically tracking the decrease in those stubborn, fossilized errors. Did you naturally remember the past tense conjugation more consistently this month than last month? Did you catch yourself and self-correct a gender agreement error? Documenting that reduction is proof of structural change in your interlanguage.
It's exactly like tracking your form and technique in the gym rather than obsessing over putting more weight on the bar. You are refining the movement. Okay, metric number 3.
Metric number 3, topic range. Look back 3 to 6 months. At the A2 level, you were likely confined to discussing your immediate reality, your daily routine, food, basic travel plans, the weather.
Right.
If today you can stumble your way through a conversation about a recent technological development, a local political issue, or the complex plot of a psychological thriller, that represents a profound expansion of your cognitive capability in the language. Vocabulary breadth across entirely new abstract domains is the hallmark of transitioning to B2.
You might still be making grammatical errors, but the scope of your world in that language has expanded. And the final metric from Tortalingua.
Metric number 4, vocabulary depth. At the beginner stage, we count total words. At the intermediate stage, we must assess how deeply we understand them. Take a common verb you have known for a year. Have you recently discovered multiple nuanced meanings of that word?
Or how to use it with different prepositions.
Exactly. Can you deploy it in different grammatical contexts? Have you mastered its collocations, knowing exactly which prepositions naturally follow it? Moving from a shallow, direct translation to an intricate understanding of a word's depth is what separates the intermediate survivor from the advanced speaker.
Wow. Comprehension speed, error reduction, topic range, and vocabulary depth. If you abandon the CEFR scale and track those 4 specific metrics, you will see the invisible microscopic progress you are making every single week. It completely changes the psychological game of the plateau.
It restores a sense of agency. You are no longer waiting to magically feel fluent. You are actively tracking the construction of your fluency.
It really does put the power back in the learner's hands. All right, let's pull all of these threads together. We have covered an immense, rigorous amount of ground today on deconstructing the intermediate plateau.
We have dismantled the core myths. We established that the plateau is a biological reality, the brain seeking homeostasis, not a personal failure.
And we explored the cruel mathematics of vocabulary acquisition and the evolutionary trap of fossilization, where good enough grammar anchors you to the intermediate level because your brain refuses to expend energy on precision.
We looked at the painful but necessary mechanics of breaking out. Based on de Keyser's skill acquisition theory, we have to force the transition from slow procedural translation to rapid automatic speech.
And to do that, we explored Robert Kocher's hardcore pen and paper writing, challenge writing, brutally rewriting, and hand-copying corrections to force deep cognitive retrieval and eliminate our reliance on digital crutches. We discussed the absolute necessity of abandoning word-by-word translation and focusing on chunks and collocations to build native-like processing speed.
We detailed targeted daily routines. For listening, we moved from passive absorption to active prediction, structured note-taking, and the physically demanding shadowing technique to bypass conscious processing and train the motor cortex.
We tackled the graded reader debate, analyzing how authentic materials like unsimplified fantasy novels or engaging podcasts can spike intrinsic motivation and train the brain to handle complex natural syntax.
We laid out the 15-minute, two-way spaced repetition system blueprint to efficiently lock in new vocabulary without algorithm burnout, ensuring we train both passive recognition and active production.
And finally, we address the psychological warfare of the plateau, the need to lower the affective filter by finding zero-judgment environments like TalkPol or speaking clubs, and adopting new metrics, comprehension speed, error reduction, topic range, and vocabulary depth to make the invisible progress visible.
It is a dense, scientifically backed roadmap to B2.
It truly is. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought, a complete paradigm shift based on everything we've uncovered today, from the neurology to the psychology. We have spent this entire time talking about the plateau as if it were a disease to be cured, a problem to solve, an obstacle to smash through.
Mhm.
But what if we change the metaphor entirely?
The plateau is not a wall, it is a bridge.
Exactly. The plateau isn't a wall designed to keep you out, it is a bridge you are actively building. When you are sitting at your desk frustrated, struggling to recall a collocation, scribbling on a piece of paper without a dictionary, or feeling completely overwhelmed by the acoustic blur of a native speaker on a podcast, I want you to remember this, that feeling of friction is not the feeling of being stuck.
That friction is the literal physical sensation of your brain forging new neural pathways. It is the sound of clumsy, conscious procedural rules being hammered, repetition by repetition, into effortless, automatic fluency.
So the next time you feel that exhaustion, that deep frustration of wading through the molasses of the B1 level, do not retreat to the easy, passive flashcards. Do not shut down. Embrace the friction. Lean into the struggle. Because right there, in that exact moment of maximum cognitive discomfort, is where the language is truly being acquired. You aren't stuck. You are building the bridge. Keep building.